That Lehman hearing comes as the Obama administration has stepped up the call for reforming the nation's financial system. Joining us now to talk about this, Senator Gregg, Republican from New Hampshire. Senator, welcome to Nightly Business Report.
Well, thank you for having me on, Susie.
Let me first start out with a very direct question. If this current financial reform bill were put to a vote today, how would you vote for it?
Well, I wouldn't vote for the Dodd bill, but I would vote for a package which I believe we can work out and that we need. We do need financial regulatory reform, and we need reform of our financial services industry, but it has to be the right reform, and I believe there is a very clear path to a bipartisan compromise here. I've been working on the derivatives package. Others have been working on the too big to fail package. Others have been working on the consumer package. I believe that you could definitely get a very strong and positive bill out of the Senate.
So what is it that you need to see that you would vote, did you say, to get reform right? I mean, what's the biggest barrier to an agreement?
Well, there are four big issues here. The first is this question of too big to fail. No institution in this country, financial or otherwise, should be too big to fail. Basically, the fact is that there should be no implied security from the taxpayers of this country that they're going to come in and back up a company. And so we need a structure that says absolutely that when a company exceeds its capability to do the business it's supposed to do, gets too risky in its business, that if it gets into trouble, taxpayers are not going to be on the hook, and that the stockholders are going to lose their position.
Well, actually,
bondholders will lose their position.
Actually, last night on our program, Congressman Barney Frank came on and he said that there is not going to be a bailout fund. It's more like a funeral expenses fund, and it won't come from taxpayer money. If that is the case, would you support the bill?
Well, that's just one element of the effort. This whole question of whether there should be a bailout fund up front or in the back is really not at the essence of the question. The question is the company resolved? In other words, does it end when it's simply gotten too big and it's gotten too risky and it's not doing its business correctly and it's in trouble? Or does the taxpayer come in at some level and end up supporting that company? I suspect Barney and I are on the same page. I know I'm on the same page with, for example, Bob Corker and Mark Warner here in the Senate side, and I suspect Chris Dodd is on the same page too. It's just a question of getting in a room and getting the language right. And in fact, we had a bipartisan agreement here in the Senate. It was developed by Senator Corker from Tennessee, Senator Warner from Virginia, Republican and Democrat, which accomplished what we needed to accomplish. It did actually have a pre-funded event, and I have reservations about that, not because I'm against a pre-funded event, but because I'm afraid, knowing the Congress the way I do, they'll spend it on something else instead of protecting the taxpayers. But there are ways to address that too. So I don't see that as really an issue that's a high hurdle to get around.
Let me bring another point that Congressman Barney Frank said last night on our program. He said that if this proposed financial reform were already law, that it would have prevented the alleged fraud of Goldman Sachs. Would that be the case? Is that how you see it?
I don't know the answer to that question because I haven't really read the case and the issue. But I would point out that the fraud action was brought, so there were obviously laws on the books to address the issue. And I don't think my concern here is that people are hyperbolizing this event in a way that is basically causing us to legislate on one event, and an anecdotal event at that. The issues that are involved here are much, much broader and more complicated and more sophisticated than this one issue. Too big to fail is a huge issue. Derivatives are a huge issue. How you protect the consumer is a huge issue. How you reorganize the regulatory structure and who's going to regulate what in the banking and financial services industry is a big issue, and I don't think we should get caught up in this populist fervor which uses one-liners and hyperbole to basically legislate with. I think we should get into the substance and do it right.
Right. Let me just ask you this way. Senator, for most Americans, they don't understand the complexity of these derivative products or a lot of these other banking issues, but they do care about their pocketbooks. Would this regulatory reform protect the average guy on Main Street?
There need to be two things which we focus on. First is that we do whatever we can to structure a system where we avoid the systemic risk that we ran into in 2008, where every American was at risk. Basically, Main Street would have been wiped out if all the banks had imploded. We have to set up a structure that avoids that. Secondly, we have to keep America as the best place to create capital and to create credit so that when people want to go out and take a risk and create a job, which is really what makes America unique. We have this energy in this country from people who want to take a risk, be entrepreneurs, and create jobs, that they can find capital and credit in a reasonable way. And if we do this reform right, we will accomplish both those goals. And again, I want to stress, this is not a partisan issue. These reform questions there's no partisan sides in this. It's just a question of getting it right and doing it in a thoughtful way, stepping back and being mature about our approach rather than getting caught up in the hyperbole of the moment.
In a word or two, give us a date. When do you think that you'll have a vote on this?
Oh, I presume we're going to have a vote within the next couple of weeks here in the Senate. I know that there's significant progress, or at least it's been represented. There's significant progress being made between Senator Dodd, the chairman of the committee, Senator Shelby, the ranking Republican. I know that others of us on the committee have made significant progress with our colleagues across the aisle on specific issues. And I genuinely believe we can reach an agreed-to bill here, hopefully within a week and a half.
All right. Well, we're going to leave it there. Thank you so much for coming on our program. We appreciate your time.
Thank you, Susie.
My guest tonight, Judd Gregg, Republican Senator from New Hampshire.